In this video, I'll walk you through the process that I use for start to finish for creating these simple wire-wrapped pendants. For this project, I've cut 2 feet of 22 gauge half round, 3 segments of 21 gauge square in 4-inch pieces, and I've set aside a 12 by 18 millimeter tiger's eye cab. I'm going to start the piece by taking the 2 ends of my piece of half round. Holding them together, I can slide my fingers down until I find the center of our half round. I've bent it so the flat side is facing in and the round side is facing out. Next, I'm going to take all 3 of our squares and loop our half round over the top of all 3. Go ahead and wrap one side or once around each side with both of the half rounds. Once I have it around, I can pinch it flat, kind of forcing those squares to sit parallel to each other in the coil. I can slide the join of the half round one way or the other until I make sure that it's directly in the center of our square wires. Once I've adjusted as needed, I'm going to go ahead and wrap one more time on both sides of the half round, pinching it close to the square wires as I bring it around to make sure that they still sit nice and flat inside the coil. Next, I'm going to take the closest square to me and bend it 90 degrees straight away from my other 2 squares. Wrap twice around just the 2 squares alone. Pinch it so that it flattens those coiled together, and then bend my other square 90 degrees the other direction. Before twisting 5 full rotations around our center square. I'm going to repeat that same process on the other side. From here we can actually go ahead, begin to bow the shape that we're creating. This coil will sit at the very bottom of our pendant. Next, I'm going to go ahead and bring our squares back into the piece. Looking at it from the bottom, I'm going to start by reconnecting these squares back into the piece. To do so, I'm going to bend them 90 degrees just after they leave the coil there to begin creating the back of the seat the stone will actually sit on. With the two wires on the front of the pendant, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, bending 90 degrees into them so that they can be incorporated back into the front of the piece. At this point, if we slide our stone back into place, it should look something like this. Next, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect my front two wires that will be holding the stone into place. To do so, I'm going to pinch and kink both sides of the wire out slightly to either side, so that it'll sit just over the bottom of the stone. Just like so. I can then go ahead and pinch it one more time, bending it straight back into alignment with our coiled wire. The finished kinks should look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and wrap my half round one more time around the square in the middle by itself, just so there's a smooth transition between the solo curl here and coiling between these two wires next. Once I've wrapped around them 2 times, I'm going to flatten my squares into place. I can then repeat the same process on the other side. I'm going to wrap one more time around my center square just to make sure that they're properly spaced. And then I can connect the two together, coiling 2 times. If we slide the stone back into place, you can see how those 2 wires we just added will actually hold the stone into place at the bottom of the pendant. Let's go ahead and reconnect the wires at the back of our setting. To do so, I'm just going to pinch and kink out to the side, and then kink back into alignment with my other squares. I can take that half round and wrap around all 3. I'll repeat the same process on the other side. Pinching, kinking out to the side, and then back up parallel to my other squares. Wrapping around all 3 squares. It should create a nice little cradle for the stone to sit in. And as we work the rest of the pendant, these wires will be pinched together at the top, forcing the stone down into that setting. For now, I'm going to go ahead and coil 5 more times around each side of my 3 sections of squares together. At this point, I have 8 full rotations around all 3 squares on both sides. I'm going to create the back of the setting by bending my wire directly in and kinking straight back up. Creating a nice seat for the stone to sit on. From here, I'm going to wrap the 2 squares together 5 more times on each side. From here, I'm going to go ahead and separate the top 2 squares closest to the face of the pendant to create the top of the setting. To do so, I'm just bending them 90 degrees out towards the front of the pendant. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap 3 more times on each side around the center square by itself. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and reconnect my wires at the back of the setting into our coil of squares. To do so, I'm just going to pinch right about at the end of our coil there and bend it back to being parallel to the square. From there, I can go ahead and wrap that twice. And then repeat the same process on the other side. Once I've reconnected the squares that make the back of the setting, I can go ahead and bend them out one more time, 90 degrees towards the back of the pendant, so that they are ready to secure to make the ending that our bail will connect to. First, let's go ahead and reconnect our 2 wires at the front to create the top of the setting. I'm going to bend them 90 degrees back over the face of the piece. Kinking them so that they will flow directly back up into the top of the pendant. I'm going to go ahead and wrap 2 times around just my center square so that it'll have a nice spacing before it connects back into the piece. From there, I can go ahead and wrap these 2 squares together. Now at this point, instead of having this square sit on top of it, or on top of my second square where it has in the past, it's actually sitting along parallel next to that square. I'm going to go ahead and put a few more rotations around these squares for a total of 5 before moving on to the next step. I'm going to repeat that same process with our other setting wire here, bringing it back straight across the front, kinking it so that it can flow naturally back into the top of the pendant. I'm going to wrap twice around the square at the center by itself. Before incorporating the setting wire, sitting next to instead of on top of the coil. It's time to go ahead and reconnect these wires at the back that will really pinch our setting together and hold the stone in place. To do so, I'm going to bring both of them straight across the back of the piece. I'm going to bend them back towards the front, just underneath where our 2 squares reconnect, where I can cut the ending short and tuck it in towards the center of the piece. Repeat the same process on the other side. From this point, I can either coil these two separate sections of square separately, using the remaining half round, and then secure them to this bar across the back to finish the bail, or I can coil them all together in one bunch. I'm going to go ahead and do them together in one single bunch. You can see that my half round has one side where my flat side is facing up and one where the round side is facing up. For the one that's got the flat side facing up, I'm going to go ahead and trim it short towards the back of the piece and flatten it so that that ending sits flush against my squares, and then use this remaining half round to coil all of the squares together into one single bunch. I can use my pliers to flatten them as I go to make sure that they sit nice and flush and parallel in that bunch. This coil that we're making will function as the bail for the pendant. Depending on how long of a bail you want, you may want to coil less or more length of the half round around the remaining square. When you reach the desired length, you can go ahead, trim that wire ending short, and flatten it towards the back or what will become the inside of the bail of the piece. To form the bail, I'm going to go ahead and bring that coil around to the back of the pendant. From here I can bring these square wires through the bar of our squares coming across the back and pinch them into place. To do so, I often find it easier to preform them, trimming them first so that they're the same length on both sides, and then adding a curl to the wire that will help me pass it through and still towards the back where I can pull it into place. To connect them to the back of the bail, I'm going to pass them through one at a time, just gently feeding them between that wire and the stone. Once I can reach them on the back side, I can grab them and pinch them into place. Pulling them out to either direction, I can adjust the tension of the bail until it's sitting exactly where I want it. Once it's sitting properly in place, I can go ahead and trim those wire endings down and flatten those wires down into place. And here we have our finished piece. A nice and minimal wrap securely holding our stone into place.
A special thank you goes out to all the names on your screen for supporting this channel through Patreon. What I'm doing would not be possible without your support. If you're interested in helping support the channel, follow the link in the description below this video. If you found this video helpful, leave me a like on the video. This helps me out a lot with the visibility of my videos in YouTube's algorithms. To be the first to know when I upload new content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to be notified when new videos are available. Thank you for watching, and happy wrapping.